Hello and welcome back to Indigenous Talk, where we discuss the problems of indigenous peoples around the world. I am Max Svensson, and today's topic is the Maasai people and how they can survive as a culture with the challenges of modern-day Kenya. Today I have with me Rose Lopez, who is an expert in the Maasai culture. The Maasai people are one of the most well-known indigenous peoples in Africa, mainly living in parts of Kenya and Tanzania. There are approximately 2 million Maasai today. Indigenous people are defined as ethnic groups who first settled in an area which they became an intricate part of. The Maasai indigenous group settled more than 500 years ago. As an indigenous people, they are conscious of maintaining their original culture. Some of the features identifying the Maasai are the cattle herding and semi-nomadic, self-sufficient way of living, the milk-meat diet, the warrior heritage, the distinctive, brightly colorful costumes, the language, the glass bead crafts, and their dance and jumping skills.
Today, the Maasai people in Kenya are facing challenges which greatly impact their culture and way of living. The biggest challenge, with the most direct impact on their way of living, are the global climate changes. With the challenges to their existence, and specifically the climate challenges, how can the Maasai people survive as a culture in today's Kenya? Is integration the solution? Climate changes are caused by global warming, and today the planet's temperature is rising more than it naturally would. The Earth has warmed up as well as gone colder in earlier times too, but the cycles have been much slower than now. Within a period of 200 years, we are reaching levels that in the past caused life on Earth to die.
Obviously, climate changes thus have an effect on all of us, indigenous people or not, with temperatures increasing all over the world and land drying out, causing droughts and starvation. For the Maasai, whose culture and way of living is built on a self-sufficient natural economy with the semi-nomadic traditions of herding cattle, the climate changes are especially challenging and very directly linked. They are very vulnerable since they are dependent on grass, access to water, and healthy pastures to feed their cows, their families, and therefore maintain their way of life. A study by the University of Leicester proves that over the past decades, the rainy season in Kenya has become more unpredictable, and grass does not have the time to grow before the next drought or flood comes. Thus, the animals are starving, and the Maasai herdsmen end up walking for weeks trying to find fertile land for their cows. The Maasai used to be a wealthy tribe with the families owning more than 500 cows and having access to large areas of land. Now, the severe droughts resulting from the global warming situation have reduced the number of cows dramatically. To deal with this devastating situation, the Maasai must slaughter cattle and sell off land to survive. By doing so, they jeopardize their traditional culture and way of living. And they are changing from a self-sufficient natural economy to a monetary one, equivalent of the modern economies of non-indigenous people. With the climate changes being a major threat to the Maasai culture, integration seems to be a valid solution for the culture's survival. Already, with the process ongoing, the Maasai people are integrated into ecotourism in the sense that they are a part of the Kenya adventure experience for visitors. They are present in the national parks and at animal refuge. They have land designated to them and their cattle. There are tourists paying for their crafts such as glass bead jewelry, and they are part of the entertainment with their traditional brightly colored costumes, music, and characteristic dance of jumping. I have myself visited Kenya and the parks and I have been jumping with the Maasai and I paid them money to do so. This sharing of way of living seems to me like a positive and valuable side of integration. Integration is obviously about adaptation by the Maasai, but it is also about support from the authorities. They need to provide land for the Maasai to secure their existence. Many areas where the Maasai cattle used to pasture are no longer available due to the drought situation. Land is also taken to develop industry and national parks. The authorities need not only to support the Maasai with access to land, but to support them with educational programs as well as initiatives for health and welfare. The Maasai must continually be educated on the climate changes, practice village living and use zones allocated by the authorities for grazing so that the cows have enough feed. Fortunately, the government seems to have committed to these needs in many ways, and 3 years ago a law was signed which calls for equal division of natural resources and a reduction in greenhouse gas production in Kenya. Thus, integration with regulations and laws from the authorities seems to be positive for the Maasai people of Kenya.
With integration in process in Kenya, the Maasai culture is still present, and the government is engaged in preserving the Maasai heritage. However, many people may claim that this type of integration is not honoring the group's traditions in a dignified way. They would say that integration is making an indigenous people into an entertainment industry for tourists, as if they were circus people came to watch, not a traditional people with a proud heritage. They would claim that integration is disgraceful to a proud people. Integration also makes the Maasai very dependent on the authorities and their will to preserve an important part of African culture and history. This can be very vulnerable since the authorities have many other ethnic groups to protect and support as well, and starvation and economic challenges pertaining to all the people and all the interests in Kenya. And integration so tightly connected to tourism, as the Maasai integration seems to be, may also be problematic since tourism is known to destroy wildlife and the natural ecosystem, with areas of land developed into tourist resorts. One could argue that integration is not protecting wildlife at all, and that the natural ecosystem is harmed by this.
An alternative solution to integration for the Maasai culture is a more segregated model. In order to preserve the Maasai culture, the government would need to further support the Maasai with access to more land. They could encourage and establish private Maasai reservations where they could run their own communities without having to interact with the rest of the population. This would need a serious commitment and economic support from authorities into the future. Kenya's other population would need to respect the Maasai heritage and traditions, and the government would have to organize programs to keep educating new generations on the importance of preserving the indigenous culture. This suggested solution for maintaining the Maasai culture may, however, be unrealistic to go through with. There are many other ethnic groups and people in Kenya, and they would feel equally entitled to support and respect for their needs. These groups would naturally be less understanding of the Maasai as a group with priority over them. For the Maasai culture to survive in today's Kenya, integration no doubt plays an important role. The process has started and programs and laws have been put into action. With the challenges of climate changes, the Maasai people need to bring their distinctive culture into the 21st century, sharing it with tourists and others. They need to be willing to participate in the Kenyan community and use their voices to preserve their rights and maintain their heritage. Another solution, which would entail segregating the Maasai into their own reservations and leaving them to run their own communities, will not protect them against the biggest challenge of all, the climate changes with devastating droughts and consequent starvation situation. The authorities thus must support the integration with laws securing the Maasai culture as a part of the entire Kenyan culture, Together, one must accept that integration, adaptation, and change are natural parts of living. Integration is also the solution to how the Maasai as an indigenous group can survive as a culture in today's Kenya. This is Max Svensson, and thank you for listening to Indigenous Talk. Till next time.